Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we plunge right into your source material, pull out the most compelling bits, and basically give you a shortcut to being really well-informed. Today, we're focusing on the very vibrant world of fan speculation around the Legend of Korra. We've got two quite distinct perspectives here. Sometimes they even clash a bit. They're looking at potential future stories, character relationships. It's a unique window, really, into how audiences imagine their favorite shows continuing.
Absolutely. Our mission today is to unpack these fan visions. We'll look at the specific creative ideas, the viewpoints behind them on things like character arcs, romance, family, legacy. And importantly, we're doing this without taking sides. We're just here to understand the ideas in these sources. What do they tell us about how stories hit differently with different people, how they get reimagined?
So, what's the takeaway for you listening?
Well, it means we're about to explore these really imaginative ways fans get involved with stories. It shows how, diverse views can genuinely shape the future life of these fictional worlds. So let's unpack this. Okay, our first source. It's titled A Korra Movie, Reimagining Relationships and Family Legacy. And it jumps straight into a pretty detailed proposal for a hypothetical Korra movie in this vision. It suggests some pretty big shifts in the relationships we saw develop.
Yeah, what's really striking, I think, is the specific angle on Korra and Asami. The source basically says if a movie happens, it should show them breaking up as a couple. Not just becoming friends again, but ending the romantic relationship, kind of mirroring how things went between Korra and Mako earlier in the series.
Which I imagine raises that big question for fans.
Exactly. How do you navigate what's established, the sort of canon, versus the narrative you want for characters you followed for so long? And here's where it gets probably really interesting for a big part of the fan base. This source is very clear about preferring a Korra and Mako reunion. It even sketches out a timeline, suggests it could happen, a few years after season 4, maybe 5 years later?
Mm-hmm. And the proposed ending for this imagined movie is, it's quite specific. Vivid, even. It paints this picture. At the end of the movie, we can see Korra and Mako looking at each other, blushing, and maybe even smiling, and then a black screen.
The fade to black.
Right. Framed explicitly as a crazy cliffhanger. It deliberately leaves you wondering if they got back together, maybe even had kids later on. And that level of detail, the timelines, the exact final shot, it really shows how fans aren't just passive watchers. They become active co-authors in their head.
Okay, now let's turn to the second source. This one's called Korra's Future, Relationships and Series Continuity. And it offers a different format idea. Instead of a movie, maybe a miniseries, or just a few episodes.
Yeah, a different approach to continuing, but still exploring that same core question after it happens years later. With Korra, her friends, their relationship, maybe kids.
And this source also tackles the Korra and Asami relationship directly.
It does. It states a really strong belief, basically saying, as long as the supposed relationship between Korra and Asami doesn't appear in the original series with Korra, then it doesn't exist.
So a firm stance on what counts as canon, it sounds.
Pretty much. But then there's this interesting sort of conditional acceptance. It adds, if there's a chance that it will be part of this world, then I hope everything I mentioned happens. And everything mentioned refers back, exploring relationships and the possibility of children down.
So it shows that tension, doesn't it, between what's seen as the definite story and what's imagined or maybe even hoped for as a potential future.
Exactly. It's a fascinating middle ground in some way.
Now, this second source then kind of zooms out a bit. It expresses a pretty strong feeling about relationships in programming for children. It mentions disliking relationships that aren't necessarily straight, being pushed is the word used, pushed in kids' series. Apparently, the author even made videos in Hebrew about this specific topic. And it goes on to wonder if we'll ever be a series with only straight characters. It's clearly stated, this perspective, as a personal stance against, quote, pushing any non-straight character in a series that children tend to watch.
Okay, so connecting that to the bigger picture, this kind of viewpoint really highlights the diverse and sometimes quite conflicting expectations audiences have, especially around media representation and especially for younger viewers. It underscores that ongoing, complex conversation about how stories should evolve, what themes they should tackle, and it reflects a really wide range of personal values just within one show's fan.
Right. It's important to remember, we're just reporting on the perspective presented in the source here, not endorsed. Okay, let's shift back to that first source for a moment. A Korra movie, reimagining relationships and family legacy, because beyond the romance aspect, it also gets into family legacy, specifically for Kaya and Bumi Yang's other kid.
Yes, another really interesting layer of fanning. The source brings up Kaya's character and notes a perceived conflict with a comic book storyline that depicted her as lesbian. And it states very clearly, not everyone who isn't married and not everyone who doesn't have children is gay or lesbian. That includes Kaya and Bumi.
So pushing back against certain interpretations or assumptions.
Exactly. And instead of that reading, this fan envision imagines something different for them. It sees both Kaya and Bumi marrying people their own age of the opposite sex. But then, interestingly, choosing to adopt children instead of having their own biological children.
Okay, adoption. And does it get specific?
Oh, very specific. And this is where it gets fascinating, connecting back so deeply into the existing lore. For Kaya, the idea is she adopts waterbenders, or at least one waterbender, and names her daughter Katara, just like her mother, Katara, named her daughter Kaya. That kind of mirroring.
Ah, that's cyclical naming.
Precise. And for Bumi, this suggestion is he also adopt. And one child is named Gyatso after monk Gyatso, Aneng's old teacher. And another child is named Aneng after his father.
Wow, that's incredibly detailed, naming kids after major figures from the past.
It really is. That level of thinking about new family lines, explicitly using names to honor past characters, it just shows the depth of investment, doesn't it? Fans really care about the continuity, the symbolism, the whole history of this series.
So wrapping this section up, what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've seen how these sources lay out these incredibly specific visions for Korra's future. Sometimes they even clash quite strongly. And they don't just reflect creative storytelling ideas, they also show, well, deeply held beliefs about how characters should develop, what relationships mean, and maybe even what kinds of narratives should be presented in media.
Yeah, and as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe consider this. What does that intensity, that sheer specificity in these fans, what does it reveal about the power of storytelling itself? And maybe about the profound sense of ownership audience over characters, over worlds they've come to love?
It's a good question. It kind of invites you to think, maybe, about how you might imagine the future of your own favorite stories, and what those imaginings, your personal headcanons, might say about your own hopes, your perspectives on the world, or even just what you feel makes for a fitting legacy for characters you care about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into these fan-imagined futures.